Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Field Service Medical webinar hosted by WBR Insights and Cumulocity. The topic we're going to be discussing today is navigating the intersection of innovation and regulation for connected medical devices. My name is Patrick Dell. I'm a Field Service Vice President for Varian, a Siemens Healthineers company. Our company focuses on oncology. We provide products and services throughout the entire oncology space. So now that you know me, let's get to know our panelists.
Hi, my name is Chetan Makam, and I am Senior Vice President and General Manager for our Global Blood Solutions business here at Terumo Blood and Cell Technologies. We make medical devices and obviously have solutions that address the collection, treatment, and processing of blood and cells. As you know, blood is a perishable resource, and I'm going to use this time to ask everybody to be a blood donor and help your neighbors in need, which is why my background says the tree of life.
Yeah, folks, JT Tucker here, and I manage the global services business at Carestream. Carestream Health is a medical devices company, diagnostic space, and our primary product is X-ray technology. So we are one of the industry leaders in mobile and fixed room X-rays. And what my team is responsible for everything post-sales, so taking care of all of our equipment worldwide. So glad to be on this panel.
And rounding out this excellent group, my name is Ricky. Honored to be here today with you, Chetan, JT, and Patrick. I lead our Americas business for Cumulocity, and Cumulocity is the leading provider of software and services for equipment makers in a variety of different verticals, including healthcare. And our mission is to help connect these products and provide outcomes and improve services to your end customers and a variety of internal customers inside of your organization. With that, Patrick, I'll turn it back over to you.
Hey, thanks, Ricky. Great job, guys. And I'm excited. We've had a little bit of time to talk leading up to this webinar, and I think everybody's going to find it fascinating. So thanks for joining. Let's dive right in. So first question I have for you guys today. What are some of the biggest obstacles you face when trying to bring innovative connected devices to the market, particularly when it comes within working in the healthcare space?
Well, number of different challenges, right? I think when you try to build this ecosystem, which is around our devices with data, with service, with everything else, one of the things that people are most concerned about, first of all, is data and who does it belong to. There's always the privacy issue. You got HIPAA here, GDPR in Europe. Then, of course, the second piece over there is, are your devices connected? And hospitals and your customers always have this concern that I'm on somebody else's network. How does the data move? What data is being transmitted? And then, of course, once you get past these challenges, which you do because everyone is interested in the insights that you get from the data, now the next piece becomes, what are those insights and are they actually useful? Because I think whether it's AI or IoT or anything else, at the end of the day, it's the usefulness of the data and actionableness of the data that matters most. So I think having some standards, FDA just put out some standards for connected devices, which also helps. I think those would be the challenges that I see as we try to get our customers to adopt this whole idea of connected devices and what we do with the data to, of course, ultimately enable better care for our patients.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll build up on that a little bit. I think a couple of things here, especially if we go into the PHI space, as Chetan mentioned, we have to definitely deal with a second level of issues, right, in terms of protection, privacy, where it's hosted, who's hosting it, especially if you span countries and things like that. But even without, like a lot of our initial data assessments was around anonymized data, so I'm not necessarily looking at PHI data. But even if we just get, like, say, statistics and usage analysis and other items from the device, more and more, the whole cyber aspect is gaining a little bit more steam. So last few years, especially, just like everybody else, with all the level of connectivity, our hospitals are subject to the same thing. There have been a couple of different attacks. Some of them are more vulnerable now. So there is just an added level of visibility, protection, to even access the basic devices, even beyond the PHI. So step one is making sure that your products, your platforms, not only just your host devices, but your transmission platforms are all compliant. We have the right level of security checks up to date always. So, with that too, I'm having sometimes challenges in certain hospitals just wanting to connect because of the risk factor in it. So step one is securing the communication and solving the cyber challenges. And then if you look at personal information, that comes with a whole different set of, obstacles.
Yeah, valid
Yeah,
point.
fully agree with both of those perspectives. I think that's the high risk, high reward nature of the medical space, right? We look at, cyber is a relevant topic in every industry right now, but there aren't many other industries where it is literally a life or death situation. And we were talking about cell technologies here and X-ray technologies. The medical devices extend to infusion pumps, right? For people with diabetes, they may extend to pacemakers, which are literally embedded inside of people. And in this scenario, you can't afford to get it wrong because there's actually a human life at the end of it. So I think that's where this particular industry, with all of the innovation that's taken place, it has to balance the human aspect of things that I think make it a little bit more challenging than some other spaces.
Yeah, that's a great point, because it always comes down to people first, right? Even though we're talking about medical devices. Just one comment from me, what we have learned at Varian is if we can hit the standards that the government requires us to for the VA and the DoD sites, then we can meet the standards for our customers. It's because they are extremely stringent. So, all right, well, good. So let me ask you this question, though. How important is it to have a regulatory first mindset versus an innovation first approach when developing connected medical device? Or does it work simultaneously? What are your thoughts?
Maybe I can go on a couple of things here. So I think absolutely it's a little bit of a chicken and egg. I don't want to use that cliche, but it is. In the industry, we want to innovate. We want to do different things. We want to enable our products to be connected beyond their normal, environment. And in this particular case, I believe, and the last even 18 months, I've seen significant changes. Is the regulatory bodies are learning along with us. In the traditional aspects, we've got enough history, but last 2 or 3 years with the connectivity and the AI and other things growing, the regulatory bodies are learning. They want to enable innovation. They want to harness the power of the devices beyond their traditional use and be able to use that collective data sets. So they are learning with us, I think, together on what's the right level of regulation. You obviously can't let it run loose. We are obviously a medical device regulated company and industry, but they are trying to be helpful, trying to be cognizant that this is all new for everybody. And sometimes they are not able to catch up on what to regulate and what to regulate. Even differences across the pond here, I would say. Our friends in Europe have sometimes a little bit more conservative approach, if you may, and they are, or more protectionist approach, if you want to use that term. And here we are a little bit more open to understanding what the value would be provided and trying to balance the regulation. But I think we're all learning, and the next couple of years are going to define how they help us innovate, because the last thing we don't want to do is to put a clamp on this and everybody stop innovating.
When you think of the regulatory space, one saying comes to mind, right? Today is the least regulated you will ever be. That means there will be another regulation tomorrow and another one, whether it's for data or higher standards. And these are all good things. And I think innovation, understanding these boundaries or regulations and how we work with the various regulating agencies around the globe has been kind of a key for us at Terumo BCT, right? as JT rightly said, it's about working with the agencies versus trying to say, why are we regulated? It's all for a good cause. I mean, if you look at the last 500 years of innovation, there have been only 3 or 4 innovations that have saved 1 billion lives. That is vaccines, actually good hygiene, and blood transfusions among them. So for us, innovation is inevitable, and understanding how do we bring these products that are extremely safe to use for the donor and for the patient is always top of mind. So I don't think innovation and regulation are at loggerheads. In fact, they probably build on each other. You have to be more innovative when you know what you can and cannot do, right? Which is, of course, the safety of the patient.
I think the challenge is in the word innovation itself. You are charting new boundaries, and it's impossible to regulate something that you haven't actually discovered a boundary for, right? And in some cases, and I know this is happening a lot in the AI world right now, is if we try and build regulatory frameworks without knowing the boundary of that innovation, the effort's being put in the wrong place, right? So I do agree that I think innovation has to lead and regulation has to stay lockstep behind. But regulators need to also understand that many of these challenges now are multifaceted. It's not just about the healthcare device manufacturers. It's about cloud technologies. It's about 5G and communication technologies. It's about what happens with that data after it's collected. And for all of the interconnectivity, I can tell you, for most of us that have been to the doctor's office recently, the patient experience is still quite poor. It's still quite unconnected, and you're still filling out forms. And that's the part where I think the regulation aspect hasn't actually taken the complexity of the ecosystem in. Yes, it's required. And I like to use the example of, we've been flying airplanes now for 120 years, right? The first Wright brothers flight was in 1903. And air travel has become one of the safest ways to travel. But even today, right, as recently as I think last week, two planes almost collided in San Francisco. We still have to learn because we're trying to figure out how to better do transportation, better build airplanes. And I'd like to see that continue happening across every industry, is that regulators work closely with the software providers, the medical equipment providers, and the end users to serve the innovation and not stifle the innovation.
Ricky, just to add to your point, right? I think this is why we continue to speak about the ecosystem, because like you said, there is no distinguishing line between the device, the software, the service, the patient experience. So unless we all start thinking about this as an ecosystem where all these pieces are connected, and therefore innovation actually thrives at the intersections, right? Wherever, two different disciplines actually intersect. So I think the word ecosystem is probably more apt to describe everything that we do collectively, as opposed to worrying about med device regulation and software regulation.
Precisely.
And each of those different pieces.
Yeah, but I can help. Go ahead, Ricky.
No, I was just going to say, even medical devices are software driven, right? So that you can't even define those things as two different categories. But yes, fully agree. Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah. What I was thinking about, Ricky, as you were talking a moment ago, is this mindset of agility, right? You have to be agile, continue to handle the change. And I don't think anybody's ever used that term when it comes to regulatory bodies, right? And so I think that's one of the big challenges, because innovation should be agile. We should be making innovations as quickly as we can, as safely as we can. But bringing regulatory along with us, I think it's going to be quite a challenge, because they, just by the nature, they're not agile. They tend to be a little more stringent. So that actually leads us kind of into the next topic, and that is, how do you see these regulatory frameworks evolving to keep pace with the rapid technological advancements in connected medical devices?
I can go first. I think it's a thankless job of the regulators, right? And ideally, some of these people have come from industry and have a passion for public service and go in to write some of these regulations. At least I hope that's the case. The last thing you want is somebody that's been a career politician or senator that's driving some of these regulations through. But I think because technology changes faster than people, right, and organizations, and Patrick, the incentive for government organizations hasn't necessarily been there to improve their regulatory frameworks. But I think as the next generation of people that either come from industry or that are working inside of these organizations start to embrace the tools that we have today, the forums like this that we have to have open conversations with a variety of people in the ecosystem, and then the technology innovation, right? So I imagine somebody that's maybe shaping a regulation now has the ability to collect information from data sources, run it through a ChatGPT or another AI agent, and really start to bring a perspective that's well-rounded into the early part of that regulation so that you can work with the ecosystem to start stripping things down. The approach to me right now seems like, let's make this as protective or protectionism, as JT said, so that the regulators are the ones that can raise their hand and say, well, we tried to regulate it. It's all those people in the ecosystem that, chose not to abide by our regulations, but that doesn't really help anyone, right? So I think it's got to be participative. It's got to be knowing that everyone has the same end goal, which is better patient outcomes, improved healthcare. I just think that the regulators themselves need better tools and better incentives to drive better frameworks inside of their own organizations. JT, thoughts?
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think some of the things that we have been dealing with, at least in our space directly, which is applicable to most medical devices, that the regulators are understanding that. I think they understand that they have a role in defining those hard lines. If you may, there are certain things we cannot breach right together, whether it be, air travel or patient safety or, communication safety, child abuse, things like that. They understand they have those hard lines to protect. At the same time, when we start moving towards more faster, quicker technology adoption cycles, they realize that they have to be a little bit more flexible in enabling those leading edge things that they don't fully understand and comprehend. I think truly where they are right now is that this thing that they want to enable that leading edge stuff, but still want to make sure that it's not bleeding edge, if I may use that term, that it doesn't inarbitrarily cause harm that, none of us have intended. So they see themselves as a role to protect that line, that final line, if you may. And I think we're all trying to figure out how it is and how it's not black and white. How wide does the gray band need to be? They want to enable it, but still making sure that it doesn't cause not irreparable harm, but a significant amount of harm beyond the lines that you shouldn't cross. And I think they're learning, but it's built on a history of years of being more stringent, and now they're figuring out how to bring the line a little bit more further towards the innovators, because they do see the value. They do see the value of what it's going to provide. It just, it shouldn't come at the risk of other things being breached.
Just as a follow-on, I look to draw a parallel to sort of what's happening in autonomous driving, right? I think that's another area where regulators have a huge challenge in front of them, and that's because even one life lost by an autonomous vehicle will be catastrophic, even though autonomous vehicles generally are much safer than human drivers, right? So it's one of those same, I think, challenges here where you have to be careful, because it's when technology does it, the cost of a negative outcome is much higher than a patient or a provider error inside of a hospital, which happens today, right? So I think even just those thresholds, as regulators try and wrap their minds around these things, people have this expectation that technology can never get it wrong, which I don't, think is a realistic expectation either.
So just,
sorry,
go ahead, Chief. Go.
No, I think technology is only as good as the people using it and the applications that we put it in, right? I think regulators are always seeking to understand as well. And I know that there have been forums for people to go speak to the regulators on various topics, as well as they've solicited industry input. So as all of you mentioned earlier, I think it's a joint learning exercise or a joint journey of discovery as we go along. And I think innovations will continue to push the regulators, which it should, and regulators will continue to make innovation safer. So I think it's something of almost like a cycle of life exercise.
I think the iterations are just getting a lot faster, so people are a little uncomfortable. I think the same things used to happen, but there used to be 10-year cycles, and now it was 1 year and 18 months, and now we are kind of on this daily, weekly cycles, which which we are just exposed to a lot more now.
Absolutely true, JT. Absolutely true.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it a second ago. I think there's a role that the innovators provide, the medical device companies, in the way they bring the regulators along and educate them and help them. I think that the way our organizations approach it will have a big influence on how quickly they evolve as well. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think, I've seen nowadays in many of the med device conferences, the FDA and other regulators actually come and present because, innovation is what helps makes people's lives better, at least in our business, right? Making sure that blood is available, it can be processed at a certain time, made into certain components is all very important. So any innovation we keep bringing, everyone understands it's to help patients more. And so we've seen this interaction from the regulators to coming to some of these conferences and speaking to kind of guide the innovations as well to some extent. So, yeah.
Yeah, Chetan, I agree. I think at the last, thanks to WBR for the field service medical conferences that I enjoy attending, but somebody from the FDA did actually present and raise the point about remanufacturing and certification. And I think the gentleman himself said, sorry, it's taken me as long to get this guidance out as I have, but I think they're also struggling with the same thing that JT just mentioned. Innovation is speeding up, which it seems crazy to think that everyone on this phone probably remembers dial-up internet and pay phones. And, here we are in a flawless quality video call having this conversation from different parts of the country. And you're absolutely right. It's no longer, measured in years. We're now measuring innovation in days, weeks, hours. And just those regulatory bodies, I think, are still trying to figure out how to embrace and keep that open dialogue going. But I do see the intent is the right one from the regulatory bodies.
Yeah, valid point.
What I've seen is they realize that our goals, and I know we're all business driven and we all are, not, for profit corporations, but they realize that our end goals are the same, right? End of the day, we still want either, more patient safety or faster access to care or more access to care. We're all trying to drive the same mission end of the day. So they understand that, and I think they want to enable that, while adhering to their duties of maintaining safety and, regulated content. So.
Yeah, absolutely. At Varian, our company's purpose is a world without fear of cancer. I mean, that's our goal. So all of our innovation is about how do we have safer, faster, more impactful treatments to either extend life or to save it. And those innovations, what I've seen in the last 23 years, just blows my mind in the advancements we've had. And it's moving much faster now. And that leads me kind of into the next topic is, how do we envision the role of connected medical devices evolving over the next 5 to 10 years, particularly when it comes to AI and machine learning? What I've seen, the trajectory of our advancements in our equipment in just the last 3 to 5 years, it baffles me to think what's going to be possible in 5 to 10 years. We just had a major launch at our annual Astro of a new product that I'm just so proud of because of the impact it's going to have for patients, but also for how much it improves the ability for clinicians to do their job. And it wouldn't happen without innovation, right?
One thing I'll put in. Sorry, go ahead, Jatin.
No, JT, you first.
One thing I'll put in is, and it was unfortunate that it took COVID, but there are certain external things happen that kind of accelerate this need for change, right? Like if COVID hadn't happened, frankly, even if I just rewind 5 years from now, right? most things that we take for granted now, that being able to work remotely, do doctor offices remotely, do things, it was necessitated by this unforeseen event. But we, at least from a connectivity perspective, doing things remotely, being able to push those boundaries on what we thought was doable or acceptable by people, we overcame that in the matter of months, which would have normally taken a decade to do, right? I mean, we were slowly moving on, and within months, everybody figured out how to do things remotely, right? Um, and a similar theme is going on right now. I mean, we talk about, you give the example for driverless cars, about, people versus technology. In a lot of cases, especially in our industry, with the lack of people, the shortage of workers, the continuous availability of talent, we will just not have enough people to meet the need. We need technologies to supplement these things. And those trends are kind of forcing, if you may, in a good way, this innovation, because we have to supplement what our human capital can provide in today's world. So it took an unfortunate event, but there are those things happening outside that are now helping us drive that mission. And we're quickly saying that the rate of change can be faster if needed to be.
I'm going to add a nuance to that, JT. I agree. COVID probably, changed a few things, but patient care at the end is still delivered at the bedside. So those people who have to, provide care at the bedside, and in our business, donors still had to go to the donor center. We still had to get their blood. And what we've done is we've now taken, this journey of automation is something that had started way before COVID and continues after COVID, maybe as a higher importance, right? We just launched our whole blood automation platform, Revios, in the US this week, actually. And what it does is, rather than have a number of manual steps, you put a blood bag that is donated by a donor, press a button, and voila, you get all the components, right? What it is addressing, and one of the things that we need to address beyond efficiency, automation, and all these things, is people. So one of the things that COVID did was probably made a lot of people relook at what they were doing. And now skilled talent, whether it's our service engineers or, people in the blood center, are in short supply. So now, in order to keep the highly talented folks, you want them to be using automation and feel like they are using technology. I'll give you an example from one of our customers who said, and this is not even in the US, they said, hey, you know what? This device of yours, Revios, which allows us to do everything at the push of a button, is similar to giving somebody a ledger and saying, write down data, versus giving them an iPad and saying, enter the data. Of course, now with the iPad, you can capture the data, do analytics and all this, but they feel that the same data capturing job now feels like it's got more value. And so automation is helping, bringing skilled people, having more of those things. And of course, as we all look at our own field service and bench service and service people, one of the challenges that we also need to think about is, how do we design the service engineer of the future? What are they going to do? They no longer need a wrench. They probably need to be technology savvy. And also, nobody is going to have 30 years to become skillful. We need to figure out how to make them 30 years skilled in less than 30 hours, maybe, Ricky. I don't know.
Yeah, indeed. I think that magic triangle of people, process, and technology, we over-index in the technology part. And most organizations, whether they're your organizations from device manufacturers, we look at software development, or our customers, they kind of ignore the people and process part till after, right? And then they go, why isn't the technology working? Well, you haven't brought the people along for the journey. But Patrick, back to your question, other than the great points that JT and Chetan made here, I think we're going to start, and Chetan mentioned this earlier, start seeing this big shift from data to insights, right? I think a lot of what we've seen so far in terms of connected medical devices and medical devices are sort of monitoring devices. They're taking the friction out. Even Chetan's, new equipment here, it's making an existing process easier, but we still have ended up the flip side of the innovation, pace of innovation, which has not been slow by any means the past 10 years, is that we've ended up with a lot of silos, right? So yes, we have data, but that data has been sitting in silos. We've tried to make insights, but we don't look at those insights sort of horizontally across those areas. And that is where, talk about AI killer use cases, that the ability to take disparate sources of data and derive insights from them, I think is going to be a key area. But in order to do that, it's going to require the second thing, and that's interoperability, right? And this is where regulators and the industry and the ecosystem are going to have to start to understand, yes, there's PHI and there's patient data and there's privacy. But if you went to a customer and said, hey, if I share your data, I have a better chance of giving you 5 years longer life expectancy, chances are they're not going to say no, right? Google knows more about my life than honestly I even care to know, right? Like go open maps and look at timeline. But it makes my life easier. It tells me, hey, there's traffic on your route to pick up your kid today, so you should leave 5 minutes earlier. Is that creepy? Sure. Does it make my life easier? Absolutely, right? So I think having end patients sort of understand why the regulation is there and why interoperability is necessary to ultimately impact the third thing, and that I think is going to be the true output everyone cares about, is patient health improvement and longer lifespans, right? And we've already the average human life expectancy is much longer than it was 50 years ago. And I think this combination of people, process, and technology, the ecosystem, the software, technology providers, equipment providers, and the patients all working hand in hand to improve, the quality of our lives. That's really the end goal.
That's such a huge point. It's interesting as I ask these questions, I'm thinking about my own world and my own company and the things that I have witnessed. And in our most trusted platform right now, it's the TrueBeam family of linear accelerators. It's been connected since we released it back in, I guess it was 2010, but we didn't know what to do with all the information. I mean, it's capturing everything. Every 10 milliseconds, it captures everything. And it took us nearly a decade to really figure out how can we really use that data. And now the insights we have are amazing. And what's frustrating is when we have a customer that refuses the connectivity, we are hampered in how quickly we can solve their problems because we can't see all the data. But if it's connected, we know exactly what's going on. We can tell the customer that a machine is going to fail before they even see a symptom, but it's got to be connected. So
I think, Patrick, the key there is value. And, like Ricky said, data into insights, like I mentioned before, the customer has to see the value. And Ricky, I'm going to go back to the triangle of people, process, and technology and address the process piece because, sometimes you have to literally map out what the process looks like for the customer. And we actually use that as a sales tool to convince the customer of the value of whether it's connectivity, our device, a process change. And, one of the things I have written on bold capital letters on my blackboard in the office, which says process before technology. And having lived in Boston for a long time, and as you know, Boston is all cow paths that were converted into roads versus other cities. If you just put technology on an old process, all you get is electrified cow paths. So you need to literally say, how am I going to set up my process, make the value, the technology, which is what all of us do. But I think it's really good to always understand that triangle and think ecosystem, like we've been saying, which kind of, I think, makes all this, connected devices more and more valuable in the end.
There's another P, Chetan, that's pain point, too, I guess double P's, right? But before you even start looking at the process or the technology or the people, is the pain point valid enough for you to do something about this, right? And I think a lot of organizations spend time solving for pain points that don't have a material difference in output of the organization. So
Exactly.
Before you even worry about process before technology.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the whole idea behind mapping their process up front, is to find those pain points before we can get anywhere, right? So on the same page there.
And then humans are ultimately self-driven, right? So I think this is the problem that organizations have, is that organizations say, okay, well, the IT guy has different incentives. His bonus at the end of the year is measured by the number of attacks he can avoid. So guess what? When JT walks into that hospital, the IT guy goes, I don't know JT. I don't want to know JT, right? But the provider who's now going to work with JT to improve the patient outcome, he's going to say, hey, look, if I don't connect this piece of equipment, this X-ray machine or this BCT machine, that means I provide poorer or slower outcomes to my patients. And we have a customer in the medical device space that up until they started partnering with us was literally flying people around with USB flash drives to go pull log files from equipment in offices, right? Our customer was still receiving the same data after that port was open, but we really needed to work with and understand the incentives of those different stakeholders inside of the organization. To your point, process before technology, that the thing I see usually pull technology initiatives in the wrong direction is that we fail to take the people's incentives and that change management into shaping both the new process and technology. When you can sit down together and say, look, everyone is here to deliver better healthcare. We are here to make sure that our equipment performs the best in the field. Cumulocity provides the software so that you don't have to do the difficult portions of that, and security, compliance, and all of it, and help the IT guy understand that it's actually going to make his life easier, right? It's going to help him with his bonus at the end of the year if he understands what it is that we're trying to accomplish together.
That's a really good point, Ricky. I actually had to take a breath because when you first started talking about that, I thought you were going to say people are the pain points, but you didn't say that. But the truth is they can be. That's why
they can be.
They
certainly can be.
Fine. Ricky, I want to get you to lead off the first response on this one because I think you're uniquely qualified to talk about it. When we look at being a technology provider, what unique challenges do you face when you're creating solutions specifically for healthcare and medical device sectors? It's got to be a little bit different than some of the other sectors that you support.
Yeah, I mean, look, the biggest one is it's a regulated industry, right? And there's a handful of these that we as a solution provider deal with. We have a sort of horizontal capability. We have customers in the utility space, also regulated, right? When you've got critical infrastructure that sometimes talks to our platform. In the medical space, and in some cases, even in the industrial space, we have customers that personal health monitoring devices, right, to make sure that workers are not exposed to hazardous conditions or gases, as an example. So I think regulation always makes it challenging because customers start to feel like they have handcuffs and they're trying to swim upstream with handcuffs on. And we, from a technology perspective, try and minimize the impact of the regulatory framework to allow our customers to still go down the path of the transformation that they're all trying to, right? So I think for us, it's working, and I've learned this since we started working with our medical device customers. What is the distinction between software that causes a medical device to go through certification again, because that is a time-consuming and lengthy process, a necessary one. But when these devices are no longer hardware and software, they're one thing, they've merged together. I think even the regulators are struggling with, Chetan, I made the comment earlier about FDA's definition of remanufacturing. If you change the entire software on a device, is it now still the same device that went through manufacturing or not? So we've tried to create mechanisms within our software portfolio, Patrick, that allow our customers to work within the bounds of these regulatory frameworks, yet still have the innovation that they require to change their business models, right? Now, examples of this might include how they deploy. I know cloud and edge are no longer cool words. They were cool like 5 years ago, and now it's all about AI. But cloud and edge have actually matured into things that are, creating outcomes. IT organizations are no longer managing server farms inside of hospitals. Cloud has sort of become, well, why would we need to do this ourselves? So we give customers the ability to manage workloads completely. If the hospital system says, no, we don't want any of this data to leave our premises, okay, our software gives you the flexibility to deploy it completely on-prem. If the customer says, hey, my IT contact is asking for a SOC 2 compliance report. Now, these are medical device manufacturers. They don't know what a SOC 2 platform compliance report is. That's where we come along and help them in managing the things that we're good at so that our customers can manage the things that they're good at.
Okay, very good. JT or Jado, any experience where your providers have struggled with understanding your needs?
A little bit, right? So some of this, I mean, in our space, this is all ingrained for us, right? This whole validation cycle you talked about, Ricky, and comprehending that and understanding that. So as we talked at the start of the call, right, the regulators, by the right design and the right intent, have this level of validation, and we have pretty stringent guidelines on when it needs to be revalidated, whether it's changing a component or technology and things like that. And now, when you change just say smaller aspects of software or just updates in there, does that require that same level of validation? So that whole thing around now the software as a medical device, SMD regulations, they're still evolving. We started the journey a couple of years ago. And yes, absolutely. If we are vendors or technology providers trying to help in this space, it's critical for them to understand those things and why those regulations and those specifications are there for the overall good of the industry and the devices. And so if you can, allude to those upfront, it just causes a lot less pain down the cycle, right? Because we have to all go through it. But yes, those things are constantly changing, and it is imperative that if providers have experience with those things, then it's a much more faster cycle to get into working with one of us.
Agreed. And I think, customers' needs are also continually evolving. So I don't think it's just what we think we need to do, but what customers are expecting from their providers as well, whether, and in our case, we are an end-to-end solutions kind of company. So whether it's the device, the service, the software, whether it's, service software, or whether it is, things, very simple stuff like how do you make sure that, our customers can not have to place purchase orders, simple things like that, electronic software distribution, predictive analytics, all these things that we've been talking about are in some ways what we bring to the party, as well as, hosting the data. A lot of the data generated on our devices obviously is proprietary. So how do we then leverage that data for our customers to help them improve their outcomes? So I think at the end of the day, whether it's, software as a service, whether it's med device, whether it is, ability to do certain things with our devices, which are all regulated, I think for us, it's at the end of the day, did we meet what the customer was hoping to accomplish? Whether it's collecting the right product at the right time for the right patient at the right dose, so that, for us, increased patient served is a huge internal benchmark. So at the end of the day, if it didn't help the patient, all the stuff you did really wasn't compelling enough.
A fantastic KPI.
Yeah. Actually, one of our goals is we've always looked at how many patient touches we have. So whether they're getting imaged on a device, whether they're getting treated, whatever, we refer to them as patient touches. So we had an ambitious goal of 20 million, and we achieved that, and now per year. And then our leader just set out the goal by 2030 to double that to 40 million. So that kind of drives our innovation and where we're trying to go, because it's tough when we talk about technology. We're always thinking about the devices and all the neat new things we can do, but we're desperately trying to make sure that patient stays the center of our attention on everything we do. And when you talk about patients, we referred to it earlier. I mean, we talk about PHI, patient health information, that brings its own unique challenges. So when we're talking about sensitive nature of healthcare data, how do you ensure that your IoT devices, all the connectivity, how do we make sure that it meets the regulatory and the cybersecurity requirements? Because the last thing you want is for somebody to get all that patient data.
Yep. Yeah, maybe I can start, Patrick, from my perspective. It's I use the general, sentiment I have with my wife as you're on a need to know basis. So like what's the information that you need to know, and does it really need to be stored somewhere? We work with medical device manufacturers to understand which data is necessary at which point in the value chain and what of that data do you keep where. I was just thinking when Chetan was making the example of proprietary technology, I'm sure some of your customers also say, yeah, Chetan, it's your machine, but it's my data because your machine's running in my environment. So then whose is it, right? And if you flip that around with the customer and say, okay, look, here's the information I need in order to make sure that my machine runs the right way. I'm going to process this within the bounds of the machine itself, right? So edge computing, back to these machines have become fairly powerful. They have PLC controllers and effectively computers that run inside of them. And many of our customers will process as much of the data inside the machine without it ever leaving or touching a network that still provides some value, right? From there, you start to go, okay, now what do I need to know? I might need to know how 5 different machines are performing across 5 different floors of a hospital. Okay, let's keep that data at the edge being the hospital level, right? It still doesn't leave the premises of the hospital. Then a healthcare system might need to know what 5 different hospital systems are doing, and they will take one portion of telemetry data away from each of those hospital systems to make some determination on how to change some monitoring across different sites, right? So I think configurability and having just the right amount of data that you need, we're moving away from all data is good. You guys remember the saying like data is the new oil? I like to use the saying data is the new sand, right? If somebody dropped a truckload of sand in front of your house, you're probably not going to be very happy, right? Oil makes the assumption that it's been refined and that you can do something with it, but grains of sand don't help anyone. And I think a lot of people are, now that cloud has become ubiquitous and everyone's receiving a large bill from Microsoft and AWS every month, they're going, well, what's the data we actually need? So working with solution providers that have the configurability to say, okay, what data needs to be processed where and who needs to know what is a much better approach to data protection and privacy than the generic approach.
And I think that goes across the end-to-end value chain, right? From upfront, from when you design the device to what capabilities are captured and logged right on the device itself, across your connectivity platform and all your kind of user interfaces. And I think that's where it is, as you said, exactly what is needed at what point of time. For clinical usage and for diagnostic information, I absolutely need the patient data tied with the device data, along with the historical information to be provided to the healthcare provider. But for workflow analysis, I just need pieces of that. Just for serviceability, I just need anonymized data. So being able to carve that out differently for your right use cases, and so these things can easily leave the hospital environment, if you may. These things can only go to your PACS providers. These things can only travel from my connected platform on this. And that has to be built end to end and across your data connectivity platforms, the device, and as we talked earlier, within your processes and the people who are handling both of those things, right? That we have to have those processes capable of understanding those differences. And we're all working through pieces of that. So I think if we fix all those items, then the barriers to entry become easier for each of those because they all have their valid use cases. You just can't mix and match them, right?
True, and I'm going to stretch your analogy of the truck of sand, Ricky. I think I saw somewhere, somebody said, here's a pile of Legos, this is your data. You can first sort it, then you can build, but then you can use the Legos and tell a story. So I think, data has to go through those phases. And to your point, JT, the organizational maturity of what to do with the data, how to use it, how to make it useful, both in our own companies and in the customer sites is the key, right? Because I think, everyone says, oh, AI is going to change everything. And my thesis here is AI is one additional tool now we have on top of everything else that will be only as good as the people using it, right? Like with technology, in every case, it can be used for good or bad, which you all know. But I think all these pieces around privacy, double de-identified data, using the data for the various processes that you articulated, JT, those are the key. And I think in addition to what we call business acumen that people need to have in companies, I'm going to throw out people need to have data acumen that says, do you know what to do with the data? Do you know what data you get and how you're going to use it? So to me, connected devices, IoT, cloud, all these are a means to an end. We get to do things faster and faster, better and better. But until you can influence outcomes and gain insights, um, it's, it's there.
100% agree. One thing I'll just add is, and we have to develop that. I like the term you used, the organizational maturity and the acumen around our data, because this has come quickly, right? I mean, until 5 years ago, this wasn't easily accessible. But now with AI, cloud, IoT, name it, because of the technologies, all this is available to everybody at scale quickly, and we have not developed our processes and our governance mechanisms and our ability to consume that as quickly. So we quickly all have to get up to speed, because more and more data and more capability is going to be available. So you're right, how do we make sure that we can adequately consume it from a governance, management, calibration, everything?
And bring the right stakeholders along. I mean, we know this is a field service oriented audience here, but field service teams are sometimes looked at as an afterthought, right? We build the product, we send it out there, and then they're usually the ones talking to the customer. It's not the product teams. It's not somebody sitting in a C-suite, right? A good C-suite will go out and meet with customers. You have to look at that request and that organizational maturity from the lenses of the different stakeholders and bring them along, right? Talk to your sales teams that are going out and talking to customers and saying, hey, is connectivity important to you? And have you thought about how your process inside of your organization changes? Field service teams, how would your operations change? And how would our bottom line as an organization look if we could stop flying people around with USB sticks, right? Product team, how could you build a better product? The next generation, I'm sure, Chetan, that your company's already working on, how could you build a better product using information and data coming out? And those internal customers, I think, are sometimes often overlooked in technology deployments. It's just kind of like, oh, go build an ROI case when you look at it based on sort of a very single dimensional approach.
Yeah, we call it designing for the abilities, all kinds of abilities, serviceability, manufacturability, data, all those things, in terms of how you design your next generation of products and solutions, right? So data has to be a critical part of that, along with connectivity, security, all those things.
Absolutely, absolutely. Tatum, you talked about the fact that AI is a tool, right? So in this realm of regulatory, so is it possible, do you think that AI and IoT, are these things going to play a role in facilitating faster regulatory approvals or compliance for connected medical devices, either in the way as manufacturers we use it, or is it even possible to regulatory start using this as a way to speed up the process? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think, the first step, as with everything else, is going to be, can I use this tool to make things go faster, less errors, all the good stuff we learned in, good old process excellence school, right? And if that can be used for repetitive jobs, maybe regulatory agencies want to use it as a screening tool for applications, or go look at, their knowledge bases and say, where has this happened before? I mean, somebody was giving me an example the other day of, legal services and people using AI, and how they are using AI to go scour all the history and the previous cases to create a brief before, the lawyer can go and argue the case. So I'm sure regulatory agencies are thinking about it. I look at it also as, the applications is what's going to make the difference, right? Whether, for example, in the field service area, because that's what we're talking about, is knowledge bases. We talked about how do I make incoming engineer smart as a 30-year-old experienced engineer, and maybe this is your knowledge base, right? We've got many companies working on what's your next best solution. So when I'm opened up this device and I have a vision glass that looks at it and it scans all the parts, and then it says, okay, it looks like that one's not supposed to be there because that's an older one. Then you say, okay, what am I supposed to do next? It's like, all right, you need to move this panel. So I think there is already some of this happening, and I think that will continue to happen. But like I said earlier, I mean, everyone's going to try and figure out how they can make their jobs or the repetitive tasks easier as the first goal. And then these knowledge systems, I really have a lot of confidence and a lot of anticipated, with bated breath, what those systems are going to look like. Because, let's address a larger issue here. Fewer and fewer people are going into STEM, science, technology, engineering, math. And so, to get some good quality engineers out there, maybe you need good quality engineering skills and not necessarily people, or a combination thereof. So,
Yeah, from my perspective, I know we mentioned AI as another tool in the toolkit. Maybe the area where I'm seeing it start to create more impact is just that ability to turn data into insights. And I don't mean data coming off of connected devices. Like product documentation is data. Customers calling into your call center is data. Their purchase history and replenishable parts is data. And I think, I use it in my day-to-day work quite a bit now, and I'm seeing other people do the same. So I think regulators are going to do the same. I think device makers are going to do the same. I think software creators are going to do the same, right? We are looking at how we use AI to both improve our product quality and how we build software, how our customers use our platform to get, I call it sort of the anti-dashboard, right? You no longer need to like sort of code this nice visualization, ask the system the data that you're looking to get from your connected devices, and how you start to interact with technology. I think that's certainly going to start to change. And that's probably where I see a fundamental difference in other pieces of technology that have come across, because this is sort of the wrapper that goes around systems of record that have generated a lot of data. Maybe the people that haven't had, outside of their typical silos, the ability to engage and interact with that data, you can now across these disciplines start to interact with, the offline to online world a lot better. And I think that'll bleed over into better medical devices, better software, and better regulation.
Yeah, well put. Any thoughts, JT, as we move to wrap up here?
No, I think just on this last point, I think definitely the recognition is there from the regulatory bodies that they need to increase the pace of their, approvals. So what you used to say, traditional 30-day, 60-day cycles, they understand that these things move at a different pace. And in taking 30 days, I could be on my third iteration of my AI model, right? So there's definitely recognition there. And as I said, they're still figuring it out with the tools, understanding how they cannot be barriers, but still provide the same level of protections that they are, expected to do. And I think it is moving at a faster pace. Whether we, the regulators, or anybody likes it or not, it is going to keep moving faster. So we all have to adapt and quickly align our other processes to just make sure that we don't do some great harm here. But I think it's all good, and we'll all move there. We'll get there at some point.
Yeah, well said, well said. And I'm amazed that this hour has just flown by. I mean, I think that we could have continued to talk about this for some time. I just want to say thank you for everybody that has joined us for this webinar. And just for any last comments by Ricky, Chetan, or JT, any thoughts before we finish up here?
Well, good. Thank you first for giving this opportunity. Yes, we could go for hours. Very relevant and exciting topic, and I think we'll continue to evolve on this. And really glad to be here.
Yeah, precisely. I was just going to say it would be great to get some insights from the attendees as well. We also, along with WBR, published a report sort of on this topic on emerging technologies, including AI and IoT and field service technologies. And for medical devices specifically, it's always a topic that is, eager and close to my heart because it has such a direct impact on people's lives. So feel free to reach out to me directly. I think we'll share contact information. And Patrick, JT, and Chetan, I greatly appreciate your company and time.
Great. Thanks, everyone. All I can say is exciting times ahead as we look at more tools in the ecosystem. So, just excited overall. And as I always do, I'm going to request all of you who donate blood, say a big thank you, and those who don't, please do, and encourage your neighbors. I hope you understand it's a perishable resource and never understand the importance until you're running around trying to find a unit of blood for that loved one. So please be a blood donor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chetan. And just one final thank you from the whole group, and thank you WBR and Cumulocity for facilitating this panel. And so I'm Patrick Dell, and it's been an honor to be with you guys today. Thank you so much.